carving of a dove. The Pope in turn presented her with a medallion with the inscription, "The desert will become a garden." He also gifted her the 3 documents from his pontificate in English, Amoris Laetitia, Evangelii Gaudium, and Laudato Si. After their meeting, both leaders warmly said goodbye to each other. Pope Francis is especially concerned about violence taking place in her country against the minority Muslim group in Rohingya. They are fleeing from what the UN calls a genocide by the Burmese army. It is estimated that between 300,000 and 500,000 refugees have fled to Bangladesh.
Pensiamo oggi, quei poveri Rohingya dello Myanmar, al momento di lasciare la sua terra per fuggire dalle persecuzioni, non sapevano cosa gli accadeva. E da mesi sono in barca lì. Arrivano a una città, gli danno.
Chinese President Xi Jinping promised to support Myanmar's peace process. One of the key topics discussed during Suu Kyi's trip is the $3.6 billion Beijing-backed Maison Dam. The Myanmar government suspended the construction in 2011 after critics said creating the reservoir size of Singapore will definitely impact the environment and affect local residents.
自主选择发展道路，支持缅甸民族和解进程，坚定不移推进中缅传统友好和务实合作。希望并且相信。 缅方在中缅关系问题上的立场也将是一贯的，无论国内形势如何变化，都将积极致力于推动中缅友好关系发展。习近平说，中国共产党同全国民主联盟开展交往以来，两党关系取得较快发展，交流合作日益密切。希望通过这次访问，你能够更深入地了解中国和中国共产党。
Solo action. The call was met with a lot of response in the West, but support at home was considerably less. For those who wanted to hear, the most asked question in Myanmar was, for years, that Western boycott, what has it yielded us except pauperization? At any rate, it had not gotten the military on its knees, nowhere near. When, in early 2010, the military suddenly announced their willingness to call new elections, the whole world was taken by surprise. Even the Americans, forerunners at this boycott, had to acknowledge that their action had failed. In February 2010, the then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton recognized that the path that we have chosen has had no influence on the Burmese junta. Mid-term elections were announced in December 2011, and in January 2012, Aung San Suu Kyi announced that she had decided to take part in these elections. As was to be expected, she won a seat in parliament. The West showed that Myanmar was now on the right track and that the time seemed ripe to consider a gradual lifting of the sanctions. In fact, it suited the West, and it led to a steady stream of foreign ministers and heads of government jostling each other at Yangon airport. Trade delegations tumbled over each other. At the next general election, the NLD again gained a resounding victory, and Aung San Suu Kyi joined the new government. On the 30th of March 2016, she was installed as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Who said I'm going to be the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister is below the President. I've said I'm going to be above the President. How? Oh, I've already made plans.
On April 6th, a week later, she also got the newly created function of State Councillor. Former military commander Tain is Prime Minister, but the position created specifically for Aung San Suu Kyi rates, in her own words, higher. She is now the Minister of Everything. Meanwhile, the ethnic issue is still on the table in its entirety. In this respect, there is no news under the sun. In Myanmar, most peoples, the ethnic minorities included, adhere to the Theravada Buddhism. But also animism is practiced, and one group of people is predominantly Christian. And then there is the Rakhine state, formerly referred to as the province of Arakan, in the extreme southwest of Myanmar, bordering the Bay of Bengal and the neighboring state of Bangladesh. Here, the Rakhine people, Theravada Buddhists, live, but also the Rohingya, a Muslim minority. Particularly around this latter minority, problems have escalated terribly during recent years. But according to the government of Myanmar, there are no Rohingya. In May 2016, just 1 month working in a new capacity, Aung San Suu Kyi called on the ambassador of the United States not to use the name Rohingya. The fact that Muslims live in that southwesterly corner of Myanmar is not contradicted by anyone. But since 1962, an insidious process has started to marginalize this group, and since 2012, that process has gone rapidly from bad to worse. The first step was to rename them Bengali, derived from Bengal, the region of eastern India and Bangladesh, bordering Myanmar. With this new name also began the carefully constructed myth that it concerned more or less recent refugees from Bangladesh. That is pure falsification. As early as the 13th century, Muslims lived in this part of what is now Myanmar, and they, the Rohingya, have lived there ever since. But from 1962, the displacement of this population group was started, and that process is now accelerated. In the mid-1970s, the Rohingya were given an alien's ID card rather than a national ID card. Since then, they are stateless and disenfranchised. They would be better off, or so is the subtle message, returning to their country of origin. Annoying, of course, is that most have no other country of origin than Myanmar. They have lived there for generations. The Rohingya then lost almost all civil rights. The right to travel, to marry outside their ethnic group, to have more than 2 children, to own land. They were increasingly exposed to police violence, rape, forced labor. Hundreds of thousands fled to Bangladesh in 1978, and in the early 1990s, 250,000 fled. In 2012, serious disturbances emerged again, which the army put down with brute force. No word about this from Aung San Suu Kyi, the newly crowned member of parliament, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize because of her non-violent struggle for democracy and human rights. After several months, an unknown number of deaths and tens of thousands of Rohingya
মুসলিম রোহিঙ্গা হত্যা ও প্রাণ বাঁচাতে প্রায় 1,25,000 রোহিঙ্গা রাখাইন ছেড়ে বাংলাদেশে পালিয়ে যাওয়ার ঘটনায় আন্তর্জাতিক চাপে রয়েছেন মিয়ানমার। এমন প্রেক্ষাপটে মিয়ানমারের নেত্রী ও রাষ্ট্রীয় পরামর্শক অং সান সু চির সঙ্গে বুধবার সাক্ষাৎ করেছেন ভারতীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী নরেন্দ্র মোদি। সাক্ষাৎ শেষে মোদি বলেন, রাখাইনের সংঘাত নিয়ে মিয়ানমারের মতোই উদ্বিগ্ন ভারত। জাতি হিসাবে দেশটির একতা রক্ষা ও উদ্বেগের প্রতি সব পক্ষকে সম্মান জানানো উচিত। মূলত এই বক্তব্যের মাধ্যমে ভারতীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী মিয়ানমারের পক্ষে অবস্থান নিলেন। একই সঙ্গে রোহিঙ্গা সংকট নিয়ে বিশ্বমতকেও পাশ কাটানোর চেষ্টা করা হয়েছে বলে মনে করছেন বিশ্লেষক।
Since her arrival as the state councillor, Aung San Suu Kyi's image of sacrosanct holiness has also begun to crumble in the Western media. In September 2016, she appeared on BBC television, where she was interviewed by the journalist Mishal Hussain.
Amid all the positive developments that we've seen in the last couple of years in your country, there are also some very troubling ones, and I'm thinking particularly of this wave of ethnic violence that has targeted Burma's Muslim community. What is your view of what's been happening there? Some people are calling it ethnic cleansing.
No, it's not ethnic cleansing.
It's a new problem, and yet it's linked to old problems as well. I would like to make the
In this interview, Aung San Suu Kyi refused to condemn the violence against the Rohingya and denied emphatically that there had been ethnic cleansing. At the end of the interview, Aung San Suu Kyi loudly complained about the fact that no one had warned her that she would be interviewed by a Muslim. On December 1st, 2016, Aung San Suu Kyi turned up in Singapore to meet compatriots living elsewhere in Southeast Asia. That meeting was conducted entirely in the Burmese language, and that perhaps made her a bit careless. Standing on stage, she answered questions from the audience in the room. One of the questions was how she looked at the interference of outsiders and at the accusations by enemy-minded forces and manufactured evidence of genocide, at the exaggeration of violence and the prejudices abroad. As if it was all very funny, Aung San Suu Kyi tackled these questions with a chuckle and grinning. She totally agreed with the questioner that of course it's all fabrications. All the evidence was indeed fabricated and exaggerated, she confirmed. It did not diminish the fun. Her listeners in Singapore cheerfully joined the laughter. Aung San Suu Kyi overlooked the fact that recordings could be made and that someone might be found who would be willing to translate her statements for all the world to hear, even among her most loyal foreign followers.
This would be an affront to the Burmese society that has become a product of what Joseph Goebbels called, you repeat a simple lie 1,000 times, thousands of times, it becomes truth. And we have a situation where 90% of the Burmese population in the country who have never ever set their foot in Rakhine State because of geographic barrier we call Arakan Range. And we have never, many of us, most of us, have met a flesh and blood Rohingya in our entire life. I lived in Burma for 24 years and I'm 50 now. I had never heard anyone utter the word Rohingya.
The Dutch journalist Minka Nijhuis, who for decades backed Aung San Suu Kyi in blind adoration, has recognized that currently, during the government of the living martyr, serious human rights violations occur as well as organized rape, torture, systematic burning down of settlements, to expel the Rohingya and stop people returning there. She added as an explanation that for Aung San Suu Kyi, cooperation with the army apparently has the highest priority.
Dat zij op haar agenda heeft gezet een samenwerking met het leger om het land in beter vaarwater te krijgen, dat is haar hoogste prioriteit en daar geeft ze dus ontzettend veel aan toe.
Are the Rohingya victims of an insidious or hidden genocide or of ethnic cleansing? Whatever the description, and whether it is insidious or hidden, it is a systematic process which has been going on for some 35 years. While the security services and the police in Myanmar are guilty of mass murder and rape of the Rohingya, the Minister of Everything remains silent. See here the tragedy. A driven, arrogant, sometimes obnoxious aunt who doggedly fights on to achieve her highest goal. A woman of 72 years old. A wise woman, some say, but their numbers dwindle. And despite all her pious references to the Lord Buddha, and despite all the stories about her study of the philosophy of non-violence and of many Buddhist scriptures, and despite the many years in which she